All right. This is lesson 7, the growth. Now, this is the final part of the system before we actually dive into the strategies themselves. But this kind of completes the trading system. And yeah, this is a big lesson. So it's all about scaling, it's all about growth, it's all about the main focus being how to scale to 1 million and beyond. So I got my notes there, and you can see this is pretty much a beast of a lesson. And I have a lot to talk about on this topic, and there is a lot to talk about on this topic. And I could even talk about more, but we're going to keep that till about the final drop, level 4, because it's a little bit more appropriate for when you have a little bit more experience. So, with that said, how to scale to 1 million and beyond. $1 million in lesson 1, the goals of the introduction, uh, pretty much gave you an exercise. And I was like, write down 10 goals, the next 10 immediate goals. And some of them are going to be financial, some of them are going to be lifestyle, and maybe some other things, right? And then I was like, pick one goal, that the goal that if achieved, everything else comes true. And that's typically a monetary goal, meaning that, hey, if I make $1 million from trading, everything else comes true with $1 million. The lifestyle, the relationship, the freedom, the things, the toys, the travels, So if you have $1 million, specifically $1 million trading account, that's a great income that it can produce, an amazing income, right? And with that income comes a certain lifestyle. And typically all those other goals are achieved because of it. Therefore, the singular focus when it comes to growth and trading is the monetary goal. You can think about your cars, and you should, and the vision and the house you want to live in and all that stuff, the life that you want to live, the trips you want to take. That's all good. You got to have a vision. You got to have something that you look going after. But when it comes to tracking how far you are on that path, it's typically a monetary goal. Once we hit $1 million or once we hit 100 grand and so on, right? So I'm going to share a story. First point. And it's kind of how I scaled over the last 10 years since going full time, let's say 12 years, because I had to scale in order to go full time a little bit. So I didn't come from money or anything like that. No trust fund, none of that, And I started my trading journey pretty much wasting the first year. That's why my whole purpose here with Trading MasterClass is to make this next 12 months as impactful as possible, and get you going and actually get you pursuing your goals. My first 12 months, they're fine. I traded every single day, but I didn't focus much on like making money. It was all about kind of like learning and so on, which is fine. But I feel like it's kind of a waste because you can learn and make money at the same time, or at least be focusing on that goal, that North Star right now, today, So shortly after, it was only about a year after, where I funded my account with $10,000. It's about all I had at that point. And I put it all in because I was like, I played around with, a little bit of investing before I got into trading, or as was kind of getting into trading. And yeah, there was just kind of like regular stock market mutual fund, that when you're 21 years old and nobody really taught you how to manage money or what to do with investing or anything like that, you go to the bank and the bank tells you, hey, you should put your money in this, which is a mutual fund offered by that bank. So I tossed some money in there, and I mean, didn't really do much. So when I tossed $10,000 into my trading account, I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I should be able to outperform the market. Goal number 1, outperform the market. Because if I can't outperform the market, I might as well invest in the market and not do this shit, So my goal is to outperform the market. And if I'm coming with that intention to outperform the market, And I having that confidence, hey, I'm gonna fucking do this because I want this as a fucking career, so I'm gonna outperform the market, and that's my focus. I mean, if you're coming in with that kind of conviction and you know commitment, what's the point of having money invested? That's what I thought, right? This is my story. So I tossed it all in, 10K, and I traded with that for a bit until it took me less than 2 years to go full time. So I traded with that for a little bit, 6 months or so. Grew it a little bit, and then I was like, okay, well, I made that goal to quit my job uh, within 2 years. And that time was coming up. So I was like, okay, well, I like this. I've been doing it every single day. How can I maximize, so that I'm ready for when I quit my job? So it started with, I was living with my current wife, at that point, my girlfriend. And we were living together in Vancouver. And I was working with a decent government job. She had a decent government job, kind of like a regular slightly over average income, you know, and I was able to save my entire income, invest it. So we pretty much invested or took the whole income into my trading account and lived off of the second income, right? Which was handy, obviously. I was able to pretty much put aside 100% of everything that I earned. We were young, we were early 20s, 22 at that point, approaching 23. So so that's kind of what I did, and I grew my account a little bit more, and then eventually I was like, okay, well, it's at a point where I'm like, I can quit and cover my income. I can't cover both incomes yet. We can't have the lifestyle that we want yet, but I have enough money in my trading account to actually like cover my income, which was about 30 grand. My goal was like, okay, if I make 1% a day, which didn't like it takes a little bit more, but I was like, if I make 1% a day, I'll make more than working at my job. So I was like, okay. And we weren't living off of my income, right? We're living off of the other income, the second income. So it was kind of like a decision where I have enough to actually like make something from this if I focus my full attention, because I missed some big trades because I was at work, and that was a catalyst. I was like, fuck that. I gotta go full time right now. I have enough to kind of like make what I earn and keep compounding that, keep growing that, because we don't need to withdraw that yet, and then I quit, and my wife was still working, right? Not for long, 6-7 months longer, because as soon as I quit, I went to the bank and got a loan. It wasn't much. It was about 20K. I tossed it in my trading account. Yeah, I went all in, I was young. I was like, okay, well, if this doesn't work, I can get another job and like just make it all back, but I didn't have a plan B. Like, plan B is not a fucking option here. Like, this is gonna work. That's it, period. And you gotta have the mentality when you go full time. Can't have a fucking plan B. At least I didn't. I burned those fucking bridges. I quit my job before, like 3 months before I could take 1 year leave and come back. I'm like, I don't want that guarantee. I don't want to take a 1 year leave and have the option of, oh, hey, if this doesn't work out, I'm gonna go back to my job. I'm like, no, I don't want that. This is gonna work, So that's why I went all in with my whole income, with a loan from the bank. I sold my car, and if you scroll down to all the way down on my Instagram, you'll see I sold my car shortly after I quit. And I put all of that money. I went to the dealership. I'm like, I'm gonna pay you $500 a month for this car, which I got like a Jeep. Can you give me a check instead of like taking this car as a down payment on the new vehicle? Can you give me a check? Cash. And they gave me cash for my car, a check. And I took that check and put it right into my trading account. And all of a sudden I was like trading some decent money over like 50K, 60K or so, 70 maybe pushing at that point because of all those things. This is shortly when I quit, right? So I went to the bank, got a loan, and then I sold my car. And then I hit some good trades. And I hit some good trades again a few months later. And then my account was over 100K. And now my wife, girlfriend at that point, Molly, could quit. This was December 2014. I quit March 2014. That's the story to when I quit. All right. And we both quit. And now we started traveling the world. And again, you can see that on my Instagram. Now I was kind of traveling the world at that point. Took my first trip was to Bali, January 2015. And now at 100K, I was actually like making some good money. 10K a day, 5K a day, 3K a day. I had some like 17K days. I even had like a 132K day. Yeah, and all of a sudden, like, yeah, account starts to grow, pretty quickly. But it took me I was risking 1%, always risking 1% of my account. And I didn't invest anything. I was just withdrawing kind of what I need to live and to cover my travels and making sure I don't withdraw more than 50% of what I make, so keeping at least 50% in, compounding that 50%. I was trading 1% and risk. And it took me, I hit 1 million in 2017, beginning of 2017. And at that point, I started to get really good at get into crypto a lot. And I took 10% of that, 100K, and I put it into pretty much Bitcoin, later into Ethereum and a few other things. But Bitcoin at about 2,500. This was spring, early summer 2017. And I rode that to about 16.5K, not to the whole top. I think it was about 16, 17K. I cashed out. And I took a little short. And by early 2018, all of a sudden I had 2 million from trading and from that Bitcoin play. So it took me a while to scale to that million. And then all of a sudden in a year, I made 1 million from trading and that crypto play, because I caught that bullish wave in 2017 into that ended in December. And then I moved to Costa Rica. It's time to upgrade, at that point. And again, you'll kind of see that on my Instagram. And then in Costa Rica, I met some people, Swiss bankers, some investors, some owners of a few companies that are making like huge money, like serious money, like 4 private jets type of money, and those people have many wealthy people. And all of a sudden, because of the network that I was around, they were all like, you got to start a fund. We'll give you money. There was like, I had one guy who was like, I'm flying with a billionaire friend next week on a trip to Europe. And he gives people like you seed capital all the time. He's a billionaire. He loves to go and toss 100 million here, 100 million there to see what happens from it. That's seed capital. He was like, if you want, I will set up the meeting, but you got to set up a fund. Are you interested in that? And I was like, okay, well, I thought about it for quite a bit. For quite a bit. I actually moved back to Vancouver because of it from Costa Rica. And I'm kind of like reflecting on this decision still because life in Costa Rica was pretty nice. But I moved to Vancouver because of this. And I was looking at office space at the school building that was just being built, like brand new office space. And I was like, went to lawyers and, was trying to figure this out, like starting, like really like digging into starting a fund. And I spent about a year like hard in that space, and then COVID happened. And I was like, fuck this shit, man. I don't want to be working for somebody else because like they were going to give me way more money than I had, and I was like, then I'm like, now I'm lose my freedom. I'm like, I don't need it because I already live a pretty good life, so I don't need it. I know I can grow and keep going and like so on, and I made some calculations on the capital that I would receive. And I was like, like it's nice money, but it's not really worth the headache because I already kind of grew to a few million at that point, you know? And I'm like, it's not really worth the headache. But it's something that I did want to do, and I still kind of do start a fund, you know? But I kind of made a decision. I'm like, fuck that. You know, I want to be the one that gives people money, not the one taking money. You know, I'm like, I want to give the seed capital and I'm going to grow this shit, you know? And I moved out of Vancouver and I went back to nature where I live pretty much right now in the middle of the mountains, outside of that bullshit. And I was like, and I just focus on growing. So then I was like, my next scaling journey, I'm like, well, I'm not starting the fund, not at least now. My goal is at least 100 million of personal capital, and then I will start a fund, you know, where I will take 1 million, 10 million from an investor, but I have the majority. So I can make that change. I'm like, I want to have the majority capital, so I'm going to grow my shit, you know, and scale it. And then my goal kind of became, well, how do I do that, you know? And I was like, how can I be more efficient with trading with what I'm doing? Not like complicated, not do anything fancy like scale-ins and all this shit to try to make more on a trade. Like, how can I be like, how can I, and this is an important question, how can I make this shit simpler and still make more money? And this is the current personality that you guys are seeing right now. I simplified everything to a very solid day trading plan that I just like love, that has a lot of potential, and I increased my risk a lot, 5%. I did it first 1% to 3%, and then 3% to 5%, and man, what a fucking difference. You know, and all of a sudden the goal became financial independence, you know. So at this point I kind of switched my capital allocation. I'm like, I want to have that freedom, and freedom means about $15 million invested. It can be 10. For me it was about 15, because let's say the safe withdrawal rate, this is based on historical data, if you have $10 million invested in the S&P 500 and you withdraw 4% a year, 400 grand, you'll never go broke, and that money will continue to grow because S&P produces about 10% historically. So it produces 10, you withdraw 4. Even during bad years, you can still withdraw 4, you'll never go broke. This is based on historical data, right? So I'm like, okay, well, I want 15 million. So then I was like, okay, at 5% risk, there's a magic number at 5% risk. Every 15R, so R multiple, every 15R at 5% risk, you double your money. So I started trading. So I took $1 million of my capital, invested the rest, and I put $1 million in my trading account. And I was like, okay, well, let's do this. 5% risk and 15R. Let's double it. And then every single time I doubled, I pulled $1 million. I doubled, pulled $1 million. Doubled, pulled $1 million. And all of a sudden, I was kind of growing that financial independence. And then I hit it. And now the goal is have my investments go to 100 million and use trading to feed that beast a little bit more. Kind of changed a little bit. You know, so that's kind of my scaling journey over the last 10 years or so. I want to talk about everything here quickly. You know, so starting capital, that was my story. But starting capital is like, if you're just getting started with this, you know, and this is your first year, it's like, okay, you probably don't want to put it all in, you know, but you want to put in something that makes an impact. My first year was a waste of time. I had some experience, but I had to rework everything. Trading on a demo account or utilizing like fake money on a demo account, this just doesn't do anything. You know, there's no emotional attachment. There's too many fuck ups and so on. You know, so you want to be able to like make an income. For $10,000, that's a nice income you could potentially make an extra and grow that. $1,000, okay, that's decent, but I mean, it's not much, you know, but it could be something to start with. Obviously, a lot of people don't have 10K, maybe you don't, you know, so you start with 1K, 2K, whatever it is, right? Start small because like you can always make that money back, like from a regular 9 to 5. It's not that bad. It's not that much, you know, if you live at least in North America, or Europe, and a few other places, you know. So starting capital, you want to start small. But then some people only have 1K, 10K, so I mean, you might just want to start with that. You might be like me. It's like, hey, I don't care to invest this for 10%. It's going to grow very, very slow. I want to actually utilize and trade it because I believe I can do it faster and better. Right? I can outperform the market. And you go all in, But when you're somebody who has 100K, there are many of you guys who have 100K, 500K, a million, right? It's a little bit different. You probably don't want to start with 100K right away, until you know what you're doing. So 10K, 10%, decent chunk. Or 80-20. That principle is going to come in a lot. I like following the 80-20 principle. Currently, that's how I structure my portfolio. 80% invested, 20% in trading, So if you got like 100K and you're just kind of getting started and you want to you have your 100K invested right now, you might want to invest 80% of it and take 20% to trade with and try to have that 20% boost and outperform the market with that 20%, in total. 80% is invested in the market and you utilize the 20% as trading capital to outperform the market, in total. Now, that's a good approach, Your goal is to outperform the market, right? Until your skills are good enough. But once your skills are good enough, and you have available capital, right? Then we're going into something called scaling account and scaling risk. We're going to talk about scaling risk when we're looking at the spreadsheet. But available capital, if you got 100K or 500K and so on, right? And you're you're going to start with either 10% in your trading account or 80-20 rule, whichever you feel more comfortable with, and invest the rest safely, whatever, in S&P, total stock market, that's a very safe investment. But yeah, your kind of goal becomes that eventually coming to, maybe a year of doing this and you're like, I want to do this full time, then a goal happens. It's like, okay, and I have available capital, then you have the option of scaling your account, meaning like, okay, I'm going to try to, because the goal becomes increase income, $1 million trading account. How can I get there quicker? So if you have 80% invested and 20% in your trading, flipping that 80% in your trading, 20% invested, because you believe you're going to do much better than the market. You're going full time. You should do much better than the market. You should have that confidence. Otherwise, there's no point of going full time. You got to have that confidence. I'm going to outperform the fucking market, and if that's your confidence, well, 80-20, 80% in your trading, 20% invested, or 100%. I was 100% till over $1 million, I'm like, I just didn't see the point. Even crypto, I just didn't see the point. And I wanted to maximize my income. I wanted to get to $1 million. I didn't want to sit on cash, and not have that cash do anything. I want that cash to make money, So, so you make a plan. If you have 100K available and you want to start with 10, obviously you're not going to 10K. If you're doing this full time, it's not much. In my opinion, it's you want to have a pretty, again, aggressive plan to scale to your full allocation or 80% allocation. And that can be okay, every time I do 5R, I add 20% of my account, of my total capital till I get to 80. So 5R add 20, 5R add 20, 5R add 20, and you're at 80%. That's a good way. And that's probably what should be done. You can reflect on it. So if you have 100K, you might want to start right now with 10% or 20%, 20K, whatever you feel more comfortable with. The goal is to outperform the market. And once you're I want to do this full time, then the goal kind of becomes, okay, well, I'm going to quit my job. So I want to maximize my income ability. And potentially the goal becomes, I want to grow my account to $1 million ASAP. And then it's okay, well, I'm going to switch my allocation from 80% invested to 80% in trading. And then every time you pull a profit, 5R as an example, or 15R, whatever you want, right? Decide on one, 5, 10, 15, one of those, depending on how aggressive and how quickly you want to do it. And then every time you hit that goal, 5R, 10R, or 15R, add 20%, add 20%, add 20%, or 10 if you want to do it slow. It's up to you. The faster you get to your full allocation, the faster you make way more money, And the next thing is scaling risk. So once you scale your account, you can be like scaling risk, right? So from 1% to 2% to 3% to 5%. 5% is probably max. I trade at 5% risk right now with an 80-20%, 80-20 allocation. So I have 20 currently in my trading account because my goal switched, right, to have over $10 million invested. So I have financial freedom so that if I don't want to trade, I still have income. If something happens, family's taken care of. There's income forever. And that goal kind of happens at around $1 million. Because $1 million of like earning ability is powerful. At 5%, that's $50K a trade. At 1%, that's $10K a trade. But to get to $1 million quick, 5% kind of will do the trick. So let's look at the spreadsheet since we were kind of on this for a bit. And like I said, this lesson's kind of a beast. Because there's a lot to talk about, and it's a serious one. There's a lot to think about, So I have all my trades here from this year to date. This is 2024, from January till June. 60 trades here, at a 75% strike rate, at approximately a 1.5R average win and approximately a 1.5 average loss. Right now, we're gonna do some simulations here. Okay. I trade at 5%, and when I started 5%, I had $1 million account. I had the rest invested to minimize my risk. But I wish I knew this shit when I was at 10K, to be honest, because I would have hit my goal much sooner. Because I traded at 1% for many years, many years. So let's make this a little bit more realistic. Let's say, somebody here starts with 10K and you're trading 1%. How would you scale if you were only scaling with risk, right? And not account size by adding additional capital, which adding additional capital speeds this up, whether it's your personal capital or whether it's your income portion from your work, right? So all these trades at 1%, 60 trades at 1% of those stats would have generated approximately 8K, 80%, 60%, approximately 80% compounded, which is pretty decent, right? Now, if all those trades are at 2%, all of a sudden you double, roughly, right? Well, quite a bit, a little bit more than double. It's instead of 60, it's 121%, but compounded, that is 200 and roughly 23%. 200, yeah, and roughly 23%. Or 228%, sorry. Yeah. Big difference versus 80%. That this account went from 10 to 32 versus 18 by doubling risk from 1% to 2%. Now, if you go 3%, all of a sudden, that becomes 60K, right? And if you go 5%, which obviously nobody's going to start at that full risk unless you've already been going for a while, and you're like, I want to risk 5%. 173, that's 1,730% difference. 1,740% compounded. Crazy. 10K to 170 in 60 trades. Versus at a 1% risk, that was 10K to 18K $8,000 profit versus $170,000 profit. Risk. And you see what I meant when I kind of was talking in my scaling journey after I kind of rejected the fund idea? I was like, how can I increase my return with the same amount of work or less? And I simplified my trading plan massively, removed a bunch of stuff, and increased risk. And all of a sudden it's like, fuck, man, like, wow, what a fucking difference, you know? Now, how do you do this safely without like blowing up? Because if you do this too soon, right away to 5% risk, and you don't know what the fuck you're doing, like you'll blow accounts. Whereas at 1%, it's impossible to blow an entire account if you're only ever risking 1%. You're never gonna lose your entire account if you're only risking 1%. It's impossible. If you run the math on it, it is impossible if you always risk 1% of your account, you know? But 5%, yeah, you can blow it quick. So how do we do this? Well, we have a scaling plan, scaling risk. Just as we can scale capital every 5R or 10R or 15R, we can scale our risk. You know, so let's just say risk multiple is 0, so we don't make anything on these trades, right? Just for example purposes for now, just so we can kind of look at this. So we start at 1%, right? So start at 10K, 1%, until we hit 1R or 5R. And 5R was hit right here, 6R. So we would do 1% until 6R was hit, and we hit that 5R mark. Yeah. You know, so now we made $625. Okay. It's all right. 6% compounded. So then you double 2%. And you can do this every 10R if you want to be a little bit more conservative, you know, or 15R if you want to be a little bit more conservative instead of 5R. So now, when was the next time I hit 5R? I'm just looking at the sum. Took a little bit longer. There we go. Took a little bit longer now, you know, so down to that point, that was all 2% risk. Now I'm up 10R, 11R. Yeah, roughly 11R at 2%. And yeah, the last 5 or 6 was at 2% risk. So now I'm at 11,900. Not bad, not bad. Better than what it would have been at 1%, you know? So, okay, well, now that we hit that additional 5R, now let's increase it to 3% risk. And go at it again for another 5R, or 10 or 15, whatever you decide, right? Here we go. I hit 5R right there at 3% risk. That takes me to 14K. All of a sudden, I just made 4K, and I'm making like $400 a trade here, versus it started off being like 60, 190, 60, 200. Now it's like 600, 480, 400, right? A little bit more. And this is now 15R total, approximately, a little bit more probably. 17R. You know, and now you can be like, okay, well, I proved myself. I did 17R. I successfully scaled, you know, so now you might want to be just like, hey, I'm just going to keep it simple and go 5R, you know, for everything else. And what would that do? And that over the remainder of the 60 trades here, all of a sudden now at the end here, you got 110K, and you're making $10,000 a trade. Whereas if you only stayed at 1%, you would have only made $8,000 total. You know what I mean? So this is how you scale safely. You start off at 1%, right? So you don't blow your account. And every single time you hit a goal such as 5R profit or 10R profit or 15R profit, you increase your risk from 1 to 2%, from 2 to 3%, from 3 to 4, or just jumped right to 5%. And you probably don't want to go past 5%. I don't, at least. But you see how big of a difference that makes? It's huge. It's huge. And now that is how you get to from 10K to 100K. You know? And now let's, for example purposes, let's copy the same data. Let's copy the same data, and just so we have another 60 trades. I take approximately 120 trades a year. You know, so these 60 were from January till end of June. So I'll probably take another 60, give or take, for the remainder of the year. And let's say now your goal becomes to kind of scale to $1 million. And you're going to continue at 5% risk, right? So this was 60 trades right here. Now we're at pushing, and now it's pretty much going quick, right? So let's just kind of go here, account total, and you can see 10K a trade, accounts growing, 150 was hit, a little bit later, you know, a little bit later, 200 was hit, a little bit later, 300 was hit. And guess what? Right now we're doubling every 15R, right? So as before, if you scaled every 5R, you know, you did 1% for 5, 2% for 5, 3% for 5, and then jump to 5%, right? That was your like initial scaling till you get to 5. Well, once you get at 5, every single time now you do 15R, you can see right here, once we're at 5%, right there. And if we do 15R, you can see it on the bottom left. It might be too small for the screen on the recording. But 15R was hit exactly. Oh, what the fuck happened here? My bad. I wasn't supposed to do that. Yeah, that's not correct. Whatever. So let's do it like this. So every time you hit 15R, okay, like this, yeah. So every time you make 15R, so I've been talking for a while. I realize I repeated myself a few times. There we go, 15R. All of a sudden, account went from 14 or roughly, 14K to pretty much almost 30K, you know, doubling. So that's what I mean, right? It takes 15R to scale to 5%, right? If you're going to do every 5R, I hope that makes sense. It's pretty clear, right? 1% of 5R, 2% of 5R, 3% till you hit 5R, and then 5%, right? So you hit 15, you scaled, and then you're trading at 5%. And every single time you make 15R at 5%, you double your account, right? And that's kind of what happened here. 30 eventually became 60. 60 eventually became 120. That's roughly every 15R. 120 became 300 every 15R, right? And 300 became 600 every 15R. And then 600 becomes 1.2 million, you know? And that's how you get to $1 million, right? Quicker. I slaved at 1% risk, and I'm saying slaved, 140 trades a year. I could have done it 140 trades, you know, but I was taking like 120, 140 trades a year for years till I hit $1 million. This right here, if scaling risk, and this is kind of like when I did this, I'm like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. So much potential. I wish I knew this shit when I started, you know? That's what I'm telling you guys right now. Super powerful. So that's scaling risk and compounding and how powerful that becomes, you know? And eventually once you hit $1 million, like here, every time you double, once you hit 2 million, right? This is kind of what I used to do and still do. Every time I double my account right now, but I started at $1 million. So every time I doubled, I started 5% on $1 million. So every time I made 15R, right, and I made $1 million and my account balance was 2 million, I would withdraw, pull that entire $1 million profit, just fucking pull it, entire million, and reset back to $1 million. And now you just banked $1 million. And we're going to talk what to do about it once you guys get there, which will be level 4. You guys are trading full time and are thinking about this now, right? But this is now when you start to really kind of pull serious profit when you make $1 million, when you scale your account to $1 million and you're trading $1 million at 5%. Now the goal becomes financial freedom, right? Because like you don't want to have that much at risk. So every single time, at least I didn't. So every time I made $1 million, I pulled it out. Made $1 million, pulled it out, pulled it out, pulled it out, pulled it out, until the end of the year. And at the end of the year, I'm like, okay, this is how much I made. And next year I was like, okay, well, let's start with more now. And I was like, okay, let's show a $5 million account because I made quite a bit, and do the same thing. Yeah. That's how you scale. People won't tell you that. And eventually, like by doing this, by pulling out, you have much more money in cash and savings and investments than you do in trading. So after the $1 million, you might have more in trading, right? But again, once you hit that $1 million, that's really good income. You can live an amazing fucking life, move to Costa Rica, gorgeous house, whatever you want, and then the goal becomes financial independence. So that if you can't work or don't want to work, you can still live a great fucking life. So that's money invested, 80% invested. And that's where it switches again. Goes back from 80% trading to 80% invested. That's it. So let's go back to our window here and see what else we got left, because there's quite a lot. So I'm going to go through this shit now real quick, because that's kind of like compounding effect and scaling your personal capital, right? So weekly target, I aim for 4 hours per week. So if you aim for 4 hours per week, you can compound double at 5% every month, 16 hours per month if you trade all 4 weeks roughly. A good target is 2 hours per week. It could be 1 trade, it could be 5, but 2 hours per week is a decent target, taking the last week off. So you hit like 6 hours, take the last week off, and this way you make 15 hours roughly every quarter, give or take. And therefore you're doubling every quarter if you're at 5% risk, which is actually really nice. 4 hours per week can be challenging for people. 2 hours is a very good goal that everybody should have, not less. 5 hours, 6 hours per month, right? 15 hours a quarter. You know that if that's my goal every quarter, if I'm trading 5%, I'm going to double my account, and that's really nice. I wish I knew this shit when I started, to tell you the truth. Because like I said, I slaved for a long time at 1% risk. So now personal finance. So we talked about the 80-20, 50-30-20. 50-30-20 is a personal finance calculation. If you get yourself on that, you're going to live a great fucking life. Now, this is when you're still working a 9 to 5, okay? Not when you're full-time trading. At that point, it will change. And we're going to talk about that on level 4. But if you're still pulling an income from a job, 50-30-20 is a really good allocation, a great one. You're going to live an amazing fucking life, and you can get rich slow doing this, all right? Not fast, like I just showed you, slow, guaranteed. That means 50% for the must, the needs, the house, the insurance, the car, the groceries. 50% goes for that. 30% is fun coupons, spend it however the fuck you want, live life, right? 30%. 20% invest and save, right? If you live by that, oh my God. Most people live paycheck to paycheck. They spend 100%. If you get yourself on this 50-30-20, you don't need to read any finance books. They will all tell you the same shit. So I just summarized 50-30-20. They will all tell you that, but it's true. You will live an amazing fucking life with a 9 to 5 if you put yourself into that kind of like financial buckets. 50% for my needs, house, car, food, 30% for wants, fun coupons, whatever fuck you want, whatever clothes, shoes, trips, whatever you value, lifestyle, fitness, gyms, health, whatever, right? And 20% invested. Now you can obviously flip it, 30% invested, 20% saved, or 20% fund coupons. If you got debt, you might want to toss out of that 30% for fund coupons, 20% to pay off your debt, 10% fund coupons, invest 20, you know? Again, when you think in numbers like that, man, you're golden, right? And if you focus on increasing your income in a 9 to 5, following that principle, 50, 30, 20, and you invest that 20 or 30 into the S&P long-term total stock market, you will retire with a shit ton of cash. Millions, if you focus on that and you actually fucking do it. You know, you live a great life. You don't need to trade if you love your job. You know, trading can obviously speed that up and provide an amazing lifestyle where that may not, you know. But even now, 50, 30, 20, you should probably think about doing it and taking that 20 to put aside as cash so that later you can invest it, or invest it now, or, you know, hold it for your trading account or put it into your trading account. I did 100% of my income because, again, I live with my spouse, right? So then let's talk about goals real quick. Increasing income. It's, in my opinion, the first goal. That was my goal, increase income, get myself to $1 million. Because on $1 million trading income is amazing, you know? So up to that point, I didn't care about investing, right? But if you do, 80-20 is a good allocation. If that's your goal, increasing income, you know? If you want to get to $1 million ASAP, you got to focus on increasing income, and that is maximizing your trading account, right? And then eventually, once you hit that goal and you hit $1 million, then the goal pretty much becomes increasing freedom. And that's now where you have 80% invested, you know, 10 million invested, 2 million in your trading account. It's still great fucking income, but you have that 8 million invested out of 10 million, right? 8 million invested, 2 million in trading. And it's like, you got some financial freedom. If you like can't trade, or you got, you know, something happens, or you just don't want to trade, you want to travel the world for a year, you're good, man. You got money invested. You can live off of that 4%. Right? So increasing freedom, goal changes. And sometimes your goal is like, I love my fucking job. I love my business. I don't care to trade full time. I just want to outperform the market. Then you might want to invest 80% and trade 20, you know? Or you might just want to fucking trade it all because you just like, you don't care about investing and putting money in other fund managers. You just want to do it yourself and outperform the market, make a nice 20% annual, 30, maybe 50. You know, that's great. It's great goal if you love your job, you know. Or you have a shit ton of money and you just kind of like want to grow it. You might have 10 million and you just want to like manage it yourself. So I'm like, there's levels to this game. 10K is totally different. Like, it's not much money. It's like you want to get to 100K ASAP so you can quit your job, you know. And once you're at 100K, it's like, okay, I can maintain my living probably, you know, 5% risk at 100K is 5K. Few trades, 4 trades, 4R, it's 20K, 100K at 5% risk. Just good income, right? You can probably cover your living expenses and compound the rest, right? That's why at 100K, you can probably quit your job, you know? So if you want to do this full time, you kind of want to gotta get yourself there. At $1 million, well, now it's like you're making good money, good income. You can do whatever the fuck you want. And now that's kind of like where the game changes to, I want to invest more, focus on growing that financial freedom. And then you had 10 million and you got it, you know? And then you can choose whether you want to push this to 100 million, billion, or you just want to like chill there. It's just nice. Could be nice, you know? Life of freedom. You know? 8 million invested, 2 million in trading, trade a little bit to outperform the market, you know, make a goal of making 10, 15, 20% annually on the total 10 million. Pull 4% out of it every single year, you know, to live a great fucking life. You don't need to scale to 100, right? But that's what I mean, levels to this game. Now, another way to scale is prop firms. Not my favorite, but it's another option. If you don't have much money, $1,000, $2,000, $10,000, you know, and you want some help, prop firms. There are prop firms out there. You can Google it or ask people in the community. There's prop firms out there that, yeah, you know, if you pass a challenge such as hit 15R or 15% or 10%, depending on what they are, it's typically like 10% or 15% total, You know, if you hit that with a prop firm, all of a sudden you get funded like 200K, you know, as an example. Now it's not your money, it's the prop firm's money. And every time you make profit, they take a cut and they send you a cut. It's a good option. I prefer scaling my personal capital rather than prop firms. Prop firms can be kind of sketchy because they make their money out of challenge fees and so on. So their goal is like for people to fail so that they buy another challenge. And we've seen this a lot in the industry. So it's not my favorite option, but there are some legit prop firms and people do get payouts from prop firms, you know, and that payout is nice. It's an extra 5, 10K, you know, a month potentially. So it's a decent option if you want to give it a shot, you know. It requires about 15% to pass a prop firm, and then you pass the prop firm, you know. So scaling with prop firms, obviously you don't want to risk 10% or 5%, you know, because there's limits. If you go 5% into negative, you lose your account, you fail, you know, or 10% it might be. So you don't want to risk 5%. That's like 2 trades, you're done, you know. 2% max. So there's a limit, 2% max. But you can have more prop firms. You can have a 200K account and another 200K account, and then maybe another 200K account, and maybe another 200K account, you know. But I still prefer scaling personal capital myself rather than trading prop firms. And a lot of people in the community in Trading MasterClass prefer that too, you know. It's just like it's annoying passing a prop firm, pulling some money, and then news happens and spreads increase, and all of a sudden you like take some losses and boom, you blow your account, and now you gotta go and start it again. But people love prop firms, you know. So I just love scaling my own capital, you know. That's how I did it. I didn't have the option of prop firms when I started off. They were all very sketchy. Most of them still are. So kind of like just ask around in the community for opinions. Going full time, what's required? Well, gotta depends, you know, on how much you want to risk, whether you even want to go to 5% risk, and how much you need to cover for living expenses. You know, if you got 100K and you need to cover, you know, $5,000 in living expenses, risking 1%, it's like, yeah, you know, you might be pulling all of it out. You know, your account might not grow that much. So you might want to risk 2% or 3% or 5%. So that one trade, 5K, covers your account, and then you focus on compounding your account throughout the rest of the month. First trade, 5K, pull it out, cover your living expenses, then grow your account, you know. So you want to kind of think about it, what's required, how much capital you require to trade to cover your living expenses. It's typically around 100K, whether it's funded or personal capital, you know. If it's funded, you want to pull some money first. You don't want to like depend on funded capital on quitting a job. You know, trade that funded capital until you have like 100K of your own. That's my opinion. You know, a lot of people would agree with that. What else can you do by going full time? If you're thinking about going full time, you know, so you can add a prop firm if you want, scale your own capital, you know, increase your risk, which is kind of like my favorite option, but that doesn't mean it's the best for you, you know. I took a loan out, hence why I have loans out there. You might have the confidence to do that. Sell some items, sell a car. A lot of people have houses. They have like 600K, a million sitting in a house. And they're like, I would rather sell this, bank $1 million or bank 500K, put it into my trading account, and go travel the world than live in this house, in this city. You know, some people actually like that. Like, they're like, I'd rather sell this shit, put it in my trading account, and rent somewhere else or travel the world, you know? And so it's all of a sudden it's like this freedom because it's like they're not stuck in this location and all their equities in their house. So a lot of people do that, you know? I didn't have that option, so I didn't. I got a loan and I sold a car. If I could sell a house, I probably would have sold a house, you know? So yeah, but it's a great fucking option. Like you can, once you got some confidence, it's like you can go full time quick. Remember, when you go full time, many things happen. Because when you got a 9-to-5 job and you want to trade well, like, you know, it's hard with a 9-to-5. It's hard. It's like doing two full time jobs at once, you know? You got to do it. Everybody's got to do it, you know. It's literally two jobs at once, which is a great second job, you know, but it kind of needs to, in your mind, become the primary. And your 9 to 5 is your secondary job. It's like, I'm going to quit that ASAP, you know. And then once you're trading full time, it's like your performance should increase. You're full time. You have the time. You have the time to make this shit happen and make sure you're ready, prepared, and peak, good to go. You know, every single fucking day. Yeah, and that's your number one focus. So I just kind of wanted to say that. But lastly here, long-term vision. So what are your long-term goals? Like, what do you want out of this? Do you want to like quit your job, scale to 1 million, scale to 10 million? That's my goal. Do you want that? If you do, great. You know, I'm kind of laid out the path here. We can talk much more about it in webinars if you post a specific question in the community, you know. Or is your goal, I love my job, I love my business, and I just want to like manage my own capital, and like when I retire, I want to like just manage my own capital. Great. You know, you don't have to hustle that hardcore. You can just focus on outperforming the market, you know. Maybe again, your goal is like to build this into a trading investing career. That's my goal, you know. I've been doing this for over 10 years. I will continue for probably the rest of my life. I will have a fund at some point, you know. Yeah, I want to give that a shot, you know. I want to, but don't really care about it yet because I like that freedom, you know. But it will be my own capital. My fund will be different. I will have a team of traders managing my cash other than investor cash, you know. So that's my goal. And that's kind of how I see my career going, right? And I'll grow that to 1 million with a group of traders, you know. And then I'll have some investor capital, right? But it's like I can choose who, because I'm not dependent on their money, right? So that's kind of my goal. That's what I want, right? But your goal might be, it's like, hey, I do want to start a fund. You might want to be the next Warren Buffett. All these guys, they started funds in their 30s. You don't need much to start a fund, you know? Go full time, make a few $100K, and then like start a fund. It's not even hard. It's not hard. You know, it does require some money, but it's not hard. Lawyers will set it up, you know, and depending on the size of the fund, depending on the country, you might require some regulations, but typically not for a startup fund, you know, depending on, again, where you live. But you can look into that. So many people start funds, you know, you don't have to be a genius. So many funds out there. Funds for buying businesses, private equity, funds for buying real estate, hedge funds, you know, there's many funds. People open up funds all the time, right? It's not a scary thing if you want to go that route. And so if you do want to start a fund, you know, you got to think about seed capital. Where am I going to get that seed capital? Maybe you already have it. Maybe it's your prior boss before you quit your job. Maybe it's a network of some individuals like I had. You know, maybe it's family and friends if you want to touch family and friends' money. You know, you can open up a family office. It's a fund, you know? And that's kind of like when you make this a career, you make this a business. Now that's kind of like the long-term vision, right? After you go full time. What else can you do? So you can start a fund. You can work at a fund. You can always work at a fund on Wall Street or anywhere else. You can apply, whether it's like a proprietary trading fund, you know, there are physical locations, or whether it's like a hedge fund. Yeah, you can go that path for sure. Some people might want to, you know, you might want to. I recommend watching a show, Billions. Great show. So yeah, so you might want to work at a fund. Or it's like, you're like, I love what I do. I love trading my personal capital. I don't want to work at a fund. I don't want to start a fund, you know? But I value community. Like I personally, like I benefit a lot from Trading MasterClass myself because I get to work with people, I learn from people, but it also holds me accountable. I show up every single day for Market Update to do our live webinars. That keeps me accountable. That makes sure that I am prepared myself, you know? Whereas if I'm not running a webinar, I'm like, Molly, you want to go for lunch? You know? I'll do my watch list later. But it's like, no, I got a webinar, I got to make my watch list. Keeps me at peak performance. And that's why I take the last week off so that I can like go and enjoy, right? So I like the educational space. You might want to do that. Go for it. I love it. Have a nice small community, good network of people, great traders, right? Or you might want to do research. Maybe you prefer like swing trading, investing, or like long-term stuff. You might want to do research. People charge a lot for research. You might be great at technical analysis after this. You might fucking love it, and you might want to start a newsletter and charge for that. I pay for some newsletters. I pay for research. Many people pay for research, good research. Funds pay a lot of money for research. $60,000 a year, $100,000 a year for good research, right? Yeah, research is a big business. It's been around for a long time. So if you're good at analysis and identifying opportunities and having a way of words, putting that on paper with charts and explaining it, right? Depending on what's your niche on like which industry you're focused on and where you specialize, yeah, like you can sell that research for a lot of money to funds or individuals. Growth. How to make money with this shit. There's many options. I can talk much more. This is the longest lesson, and it's for a reason. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to think about, and I hope this covers your questions. If it doesn't, post them in the community, and I'll get to them. And there's going to be more on this in level 4. This is level 1. This is to get started and to have your epic first 12 months. So we're going to talk about this in level 4 when it's actually like time to fucking quit and go full time and scale and so on. I spent an hour talking. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. We're hitting the strategies next, where we put it all together. So we broke down the system. Now it's time for the strategies. I'll see you in the next lesson. Take care.